Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 25 Service Authority meeting. Our first order of business is to consider any request for electronic participation. And we're all here. I don't think we have any. That's correct. All right. So moving right along, we'll go into public comments. And I'll turn to staff if we got anybody who's asked to make public comment. All right. Anybody joining us online or Mr. Hardy who would like to make some comment today?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody online?
No.
Okay. All right. So then we'll go to the minutes of our June 28th meeting, please. It's the pleasure of the authority on those. To approve.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you. All right. So item 3, financial assurances and capacity analysis. I'll turn it over to you, Clark.
Okay, yeah, each year we send the members an updated financial assurance letter. And basically that just describes what your liability is as far as based on your percentages of waste that comes from your locality. That's the member waste plus the market waste. That's all the waste that comes from you. And that's how we determine those values. It's something that DEQ requires us to do every year. We have set up our budget, from the very beginning to hopefully never have to use that to fully fund the closure and post-closure. And that's what the financial assurance is for: closure and post-closure. Make sure that if something happens, that the members will financially sure that landfill will be closed properly and will be funded through the entire post-closure period properly, which is 30 years. So that's what those documents are all about. And they're based on a capacity study that we do annually as well. And that you've got a copy of that too. And that shows, find mine. That to date, we have about 31% of the capacity in the livestock road landfill left. And in years that, according to our tonnage rates, that will come out to somewhere end of calendar year 28, beginning of calendar year 29. I typically will just use January 29 is what we're looking at reaching capacity. Now, as we get closer to that date, that will tighten up some. Right now, that could vary as much as couple months either way. But as we approach the end of the landfill life, that target date will tighten up to where we'll actually have to close the landfill.
Do you know what cubic yard conversion factor is being used to calculate that?
Yeah, each landfill is different. We have a landfill utilization factor of 1,400 pounds per cubic yard. That can vary, from landfill to landfill, 100 pounds per cubic yard in one direction or the other, or even more, depending on how well your landfill is operated. The landfill utilization factor is the compaction rate that you're getting at your landfill, plus the soils that are going into the landfill for covers. So based on those numbers and our tonnage projection, that we're looking at reaching capacity in phase 5, which is the last permitted cell, sometime towards the end of calendar year 28, beginning of calendar year 29. Well, Bill Hayes, from TRC, actually wrote the report that can address that in more detail if you'd like to ask him some questions.
Mr. Hayes, prior to receiving any questions, anything you'd like to say in addition to Clark's summary there?
No, I think he summarized it pretty well. It just, that utilization factor is the tons of waste that goes into, basically it's the ton of waste plus soil cover. Let me back up again. I'm sorry, I apologize. It is the capacity used over a given period divided by the tons. So it is, as Clark said, it's the waste plus the soil total volume divided by how many tons of waste was put in there. So that's kind of a factor that's used instead of a waste compaction, because waste compaction you can't really evaluate without knowing the exact amount of soil cover that goes in. So we just generally use this landfill utilization factor. But he's correct in that, yeah, the 1400 or whatever 1421, I think is more exact number we use, is a pretty good number. I've seen them range from 1200, 1300 on up even a little higher, 1500. But yeah, I think you're doing a pretty good job.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Clark or Mr. Hayes?
If I'm understanding correctly, this is not based on the compaction factor,
The waste,
1421.
go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the 1421 is the historic average, or yeah, the average that we've calculated over a several year period.
And yes, it does include compaction, because what that is
Yes.
how many how many pounds of waste we can squeeze into a cubic yard. And so yes, that is part of the compaction. Some landfills, like Bill said, do worse. Some landfills with a different waste stream characterization might get a little bit more, but 1400 also includes the soil cover that we have to put in the landfill periodically. So yes, that does include our compaction rate.
So shouldn't you be able to take that 1,400 pounds per cubic yard and multiply it by the 1,732,700 cubic yards remaining? Come up with a number and divide that by 2,000 pounds to get tonnage figure, and then divide that by our average tons per year to get the number of years left.
Well, that's what Bill has done in these spreadsheets. And that's where we're coming up with roughly end of February, end of FY28, beginning of 2029.
I could have done something wrong, but when I did that calculation myself, I came up with 13.6 more years after 23. So, which obviously is longer than the 2029. So that's why I'm trying to get some clarification on that.
What is the financial assurance? I thought I read that was 2032. Somewhere in there.
No, because the financial assurance document comes from these numbers. They use the capacity analysis that we update annually, and to use to come up with that document that we send you.
Any other questions on this matter? Anything else from staff on it?
Can he send us his calculation? How he derived that number?
Sure.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
All right, anything else on this topic before we move on? I don't want to rush it, but I'm sensing a call.
I think he's good.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that moves us to the employee compensation study discussion. Floor is still yours, Clark.
Okay, Alec was gonna start us off and we're gonna kind of tag team on it.
I just wanted to start by saying, as you all know, that Central Virginia Planning Commission is responsible for the personnel payroll and management organization. So the last time the CDC did a full-blown salary study, which included the employees landfill, was 2014. So we were approaching a 10-year mark. I thought it might be appropriate to review it for 2 reasons. One is something the age study with the recent curve of inflation, but two is the possibility. I would say this specifically like to Region 2000, and therefore any salary and compensation study, a comp and class study would be appropriate to be specific to the region for the possibility of the 2029 sunset of capacity. So at this point, we're looking at 5 years of remaining life potentially, and therefore a need for retention of employees through that 5-year period. And we would seek to, in the study, identify similar scenarios, similarly situated organizations that may have needed to hang on to personnel, and what packages or incentives they've done to ensure that those personnel stay at the facility so that the facility is adequately staffed through that 2029 closure period. If we were not able to retain the staff adequately to hold on to operate landfill, it would be necessary to bring in a private contractor of some type that would then also be housing competing while they were in the area, and it would be significantly more expensive, we believe, than the likelihood of a compensation package necessary to ensure that we're adequately staffed the remaining life of the landfill. So Clark has additional information based on current openings and some other comparable facilities around the region that he would choose to share.
Yeah,
Clark, if I could, I would just like to ask the folks joining us remotely to make sure your mics are muted. We're getting a little bit of noise in the room. So in the absence of offering a comment, if you would mute your mic, please. Thank you. All right, Clark, sorry.
okay. Yeah, I think everything Alec mentioned was very important to keep staff on board throughout the remaining life of the landfill. And we need to come up with some packages to that will ensure that we don't start losing employees as we get close to 2029. And also presently, we did do a comprehensive employee compensation study, was about 8 years ago, something like that. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we took a look at just the operators only, because we keep kind of losing ground to the private sector, and even state and even nearby localities. We keep losing ground on our what we're paying our operators, and so I think it's time to take another look at that. I had an employee bring a document to me, an advertisement for an Amherst County landfill equipment operator. This is just recently. One of our employees brought this to me. Their starting pay for an equipment operator is $22.59 an hour, or $47,000 a year. That's what they're advertising. And our highest paid operator and most experienced operator is making $22.86 an hour. So I think we really need to take a look at our current compensation for our employees, as well as a plan for the next 4 or 5 years. We're not asking for any decisions today, but we just wanted to start a discussion on that.
I guess my thoughts are, I think a salary study is warranted. I mean, all of us have been engaged in those over the last couple of years. Knowing if employees understand a salary study doesn't necessarily mean that you will get extra compensation or an increase, because they're all over the place.
Yep.
And so then you have to figure out what sector, it's going to tell us which sector needs to get that increase.
Yeah.
Looking at the 5-year projection on the closure of the landfill, I think more of an incentive to keep those people would be a type of severance at the end of that 5 years and when it closed, because it's really not an incentive knowing your job's gonna end in 5 years in all reality. So, do we need to look at a separate package is if you're here at the end of that 5 years, what that severance may look like?
Yeah,
in order
I
to
think that's a good
incentivize,
idea.
And Clark, do we end up keeping any portion of the employees through and into post-closure? How does that work?
Yeah, once we close the gates at the landfill, we're gonna need to keep a staff of operators around for probably about 6 months to, just kind of button everything up, make the transition, because that's about the same time the contractors will be coming in to actually put the final closure cap on the landfill. So we'll need a little transition period, probably, I'd say at least 6 months, maybe a little longer, I don't know, but, and then once we get to the landfill, and it's gonna take probably about, once we close the landfill, and I'm gonna send out an additional project report showing you what an actual closure schedule would probably look like. When I get to my director report, but, once the landfill has been, the closure cap is completed, we're gonna need, probably a staff of maybe 1 or 2 employees, probably here for 30 years. To manage because you can't just walk away from a landfill. You can't just say, close the gates, put the cap on it. Don't ever do anything, because you've got to manage a 30-year post-closure period. There's gonna be consultants that need to be managed, need to be scheduled. There's gonna be grounds that are gonna need to be maintained. And that's a very, very important part of your closure process, is maintaining the grounds. So we're gonna need to have a very small staff on hand for probably the duration of the post-closure period. It's probably gonna be like a supervisor, manager type. And I would also recommend that we have like an environmental technician type to kind of manage all the regulatory issues, especially up front when you're closing the landfill. And the theory is it's a lined landfill, so hopefully your semi-annual monitoring and your gas monitoring that has to continue. You won't see any issues from that, but sometimes things happen. And so there's going to be, we're going to have a staff at the landfill for the entire post-closure period.
And that should be covered by our post-closure fund.
Yes, that's yeah.
It's part of that.
So I agree with Susan. My interest is the retention side of this conversation, strategies that make the most sense there. I'm a little hesitant on a compensation study because I'm not a fan of asking questions that we're not prepared to answer. If I looked at the financials today, it looks to me, and I'm waiting to be briefed this afternoon, that there's a gap, between where we are and where our activity needs to be. And does a compensation study just compound that? And if it does, are we really at the table to meet that? And if we're not, sort of your point, Susan, have we created false hope that just becomes counterproductive toward retention? And so I have sort of mixed emotions about it, not because I don't want everybody to be fairly compensated, but just when a study comes back and says your cost of operation must go up, are we ready to do that? And if we're not, I'd say let's focus on a retention analysis, because I think we all, I won't speak for anybody, understand the need for that element of it, if that's a appropriate way to split the analysis. That's just my sense of it. So. Okay. So staff said you're not looking for any direction, no decisions today? Just having this conversation?
Yeah, we're just beginning the conversation to prepare for our upcoming budget.
Okay, I appreciate you looking forward on that. Do you all have any other questions of staff on this?
No, the only thing I would suggest, if you have employees that you are concerned about possibly just do an internal, yourself, have staff call around and do a study of comparable regions or whatever, and just to see what those pay scales are. And then at the time of budget prep would be the time to address it.
Okay, that's kind of what we did a few years ago, and that was very helpful, very, it was very helpful, and, maybe we'll take that approach, but there's two, like you said, there's two parts to this, and the retention is very, very important.
Get that. We all get that.
Okay, good deal. If there's nothing further on that, we'll move on into our organizational reports. Please.
Yeah, the first item I just wanted to bring to your attention, the annual audit is underway. Our friend from Robinson Farmer Cox visited the office in August of this past week with some funds about it, and the audit preparations go underway. The engagement letter has been included in your packet for reference. You might recall last year they wanted us to vote on it. They have not asked us to vote on it this year, which is interesting. So it's simply about merits a signature and a return. But it's, of course, it's done as they told me last year. It is done for the board and not for the staff. So I wanted to just bring this to your attention that this happened. This board will be presenting the findings, obviously, in the January meeting as we did last year. So that's all I have of that. They're a very supportive report and happy to answer the questions.
Is the cost increase any from last year? For the
Well,
audit?
it was this $10,000 or $12,000. Like, sorry, I don't know.
14.5 is going in.
Well, that's what that 2,000. Okay, with some gapping.
I have to look into that, get back to you. Just
Curious.
Sure.
Okay, so next we had land gas.
Second item, the land gas report. There has been a talk with consultant Bill Hefty, our legal counsel, and there's been a verbal agreement on a settlement for that particular case. And so we don't have anything in writing, but you recall at a previous board meeting, the board authorized the staff, the legal counsel to reach a settlement at a certain, no greater than a certain threshold. And so that's in progress. And so assuming that that is able to be concluded upon, there will be no further action required by the board. But I did want to report back to you and advise that it would be my intention to sign that settlement in accordance with your motion. I'll reconsider.
Yeah, my understanding, we've all authorized that previously, so I appreciate the update. I'm gonna ask staff, as you give reports, we've got a request online to come to the table so that the mic is picking up a little bit better. Any questions for Alec on the land gas matter? All right, Sandy, come on forward, please, and do the financial report.
All right, on the financials. Let's see. Our expenses are pretty much on point for the quarter. There's nothing really out of the ordinary to report on that. I did want to point out the equipment cost. We did have some unexpected repairs that we had to do that were capitalized expenses. So we've almost maxed out our budget for equipment for this year. And depending on what else we have come up, I just wanted to make you aware of that. The main thing I wanted to go over was on the balance sheet. You can turn to that. There were some questions last time about how we were allocating the funds that are held for excess revenue and for the airspace reserve. So we have reallocated everything in our LGIP accounts to make that more clear to everyone as far as what's due to Lynchburg with interest, Campbell County with interest, and then the airspace reserve, which is the host fee. We have that in a separate account for, so you can see that dollar value. And we've also put our 25% of that airspace reserve into a separate account as well. I think there were some issues with questions about, we had intended to put it in with our operating, and then we decided we weren't supposed to be doing that. So we've set that aside and we're not using that for operating expenses at this time. So anything for that 25% is going into that account annually. So we'll set aside at the end of this coming year, whatever we have available into that account.
Appreciate that. I think that was what our motion was, right? Set it aside to resolve our differences. Okay.
Yeah, so you should be able to see that fairly clearly. And if you have any questions, you can let me know.
You mentioned the reserve fund set aside with interest.
Yes.
Okay, what interest is that?
Well, it's the interest on the LGIP accounts. They're all interest-bearing accounts. I think
So
it's
that's
around-
the total, including the interest plus
Yes.
what was in the reserve.
Yes, we did a reallocation of all the interest earned to date in the accounts, and I have those calculations if you'd like to see.
Can you
them.
separate that out?
Yes, I
Okay,
did. So
okay.
you can see where how we came up with all those numbers.
Okay, Sandy, anything else you wanted to highlight for us?
No, I think that's pretty much it, unless anyone has any questions.
Questions for staff on the financial?
All right, so I'm looking at this and it says the total closure, post-closure is 12,875,833. Is that correct?
Which line are you looking at?
I'm about 3/4 down the page. Oh, it's on your balance sheet.
In the liabilities?
Mhm. So is that? I'm just trying to wrap my arms around what that 12 million means.
Well,
That's a liability, but we, in the reserve, we have what,
correct.
3.3?
3.3 roughly. Yes. Well, what the accountants have done, from my understanding, is they've basically just taken what we should have been putting away over the years, and they've been accruing that into the account. So technically, we should have been putting aside that dollar amount of liability. Which we did not fund it, so that's why we're playing catch up now, but that's actually what our liability was during those years where we didn't actually fund it.
But I think the other documents, what, 16 million now, what they're saying with post-closure?
Yes.
So, yeah,
And I think we have that document, Alec, that shows how they came up with that figure. That's probably the most helpful document I've seen,
See, okay.
that shows how they came up with what that, final dollar value is. I know we've looked at the pro forma and there's been some questions about the 22 million, the whatever it is, but this document actually shows,
How they calculate.
how they calculate it. And it's much more clear. I think Alec has copies of those.
And we sent that out last night, laid out.
Do you have extra copies of that? Because I did not bring it
Sure.
into.
Get that out again.
I made copies of those, yes.
Question, but I don't think you can answer.
we got a lot of people on the call.
I'll wait for Sandy. No, it's just, and Alex may know this. Back on the budget itself, it has a section with the reimbursables, which is about $200,000. And I'm not seeing it on here, y'all may reflect it somewhere else. Is that showing like in the revenue just to create a zero, just the wash? In the expense budget, we're paying out these monies that are reimbursable.
Right.
But I don't see those on the revenue sheet. And I may be missing it.
Crediting to the, we're not counting them as expenses.
You're not?
Crediting them as.
Okay, where is that shown? I'm looked, but
Rather than show them. as revenue.
but it's still an expense.
So if you look on the operations, you'll see, for example, this, the engineering and monitoring services for the reimbursements. That's all included at 100% on the expenses. And then we're offsetting it with the billing we receive back from the localities.
Okay, so that's shown on here.
Yes, that's that separate sheet, the reimbursable.
Oh, here it is on the.
going in.
Schedule 4.
Well, schedule
Is that right?
5.
How many pages I need?
Yeah, because on Schedule 4, we do have 100% of whatever the actual expense is. And then we bill the localities for whatever their portion of that cost is. So it's being offset with this line item here, the reimbursables on that Schedule 4.
Okay, I see that. It's on the back.
And the
Thank you.
reimbursables, just.
A
look
wash, right?
background. Well, those are the charges that we charge back to Lynchburg and Campbell County for the percentage of waste that, that was in place prior to the region, begin operating as an authority.
Right,
They agreed to
to pay.
continue to pay a portion of all the environmental monitoring costs, moving forward.
Right, I was just making sure that it's shown as an expense and we're also showing it as a income.
Make sure. we're in the-
Yeah.
Okay, so
the
that's
wash.
reimbursables, but I don't want to lose your prior question, on the closure. I think you were asking.
Oh,
about the
yes,
difference
those numbers, yeah.
between The 12 million and the 16.
16.
So this sheet that I gave you, I don't know if this is what Clark was gonna go over or not. But basically, this baseline scenario for 2023, you'll see that 16,272,000. That's from the DEQ report. And what they're doing is increasing that by 2.8% inflation factor each year. And that's how they're reaching that 19,204,000
Okay,
that will have the liability. That's their estimated liability just based on that inflation. So then they're just putting what we have as our ending balance in 2023 in our closure, post-closure, offsetting it with whatever interest we're earning on that account. And then with our contributions, they're showing what we need to get to that 19 million at the end of 2029.
thank you.
So the takeaway from me there, and I want to make sure it's correct, is we're coming up on having to put $2 million a year into closure, post-closure. Right? And so that's, what are we, 200,000 tons? It's $10 a ton. In FY25. Right, for the next budget. This is basically a heads up.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know we have a lot of debate about all the held money, but again, just to be sure, even if all the, I think just rebranded it, held money is directed at this, we still have a gap.
The longer we wait to start making contributions, the larger the annual contributions that will be required as the event horizon is going. Right? So we've got 26, 27, 28. We've got $3 million a year. We didn't contribute to 2 million in 25. We would actually then spread out 2 million over those years.
And that cost is only gonna go up. It went up, what, 200,000 this past year? From one financial assurance to the other?
There was a 7% inflation factor.
Yeah, the DEQ inflation was really high.
Yeah.
Because they kind of hand that inflation rate down.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they give us the interest rate we have to calculate. So the 2.8 is,
Alone.
could be low.
Yeah.
Susan, does that answer your question?
That
on the
does.
numbers?
Thank you,
Okay.
yeah.
Anything else for Sandy on the financial report?
I am curious about the employee insurance. What rate came in on that? I know we were discussing it at budget time, but you really didn't have any numbers.
The rates, is that what you said? I can give you the rate sheet that we have currently. If you
Do
look
we
at-
cover employee insurance? Do we pay that?
We pay a portion.
Okay. Well,
Typically, it
the-
runs anywhere from 25 to 35% that we pay, that the employee pays, and PDC picks up the balance. But I can get you that rate sheet, so you
Okay.
can see.
I do have another question. I think related to, I think when we were working up the 24 budget, there was discussion about possible extra or another 2% on top of the 5% COLA that we've given, and we set money aside for that, I do believe.
That's,
So is that gonna be implemented at any point during this fiscal year, or we didn't discuss that at all?
Is it?
We were, no, were instructed to delete it at our,
Take it out.
yes, so we took it out completely.
Okay,
initially, we had said hold it in advance, if
Right.
you will, to see what the state did, but then we came back and didn't raise the step fee, so we borrowed from whatever, year-end account, a couple
Yeah.
$100,000, and then we took the 2% off.
okay.
One of our balancing strategies, as I
Yeah.
recall.
Yes,
That's right.
and we adjusted the O and M account down too, because I think we had like
Correct.
1 million, we adjusted that down too. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate that.
What would that cost? The 2% effective December.
It's about 24 grand.
We want to talk about possibly finding somewhere.
I remain open to it, I don't know what our budget capacity is.
Well, we do have,
Where's the cushion?
Is there enough vacancy savings this year to cover?
that's what I was
We,
gonna
we,
say.
we've had a mechanic position open for quite a while that, I'm really not holding out much hope of even filling that position, with 4 or 5 years passing left. So there's probably a little cushion right there. I don't want to eliminate the position just yet, but, we've been having difficulty even getting
Okay, we're
applications.
taking the funding from it.
Well, would that incentivize you not to hire yet?
Well, we've already almost 6 months out, so.
Okay,
So there's probably something in there.
so the 24 was for the entire year, or have you calculated from December to June?
That was for the entire year that we had
Okay.
budgeted.
So that would cover benefits and the increase.
You'd only need 14-ish, 15.
If we do it now, yes, as long as we don't retroactively.
When's the state? 2%?
It's 2%
December, right?
December.
December and then
So it'll be-
schools is June.
My employees have been asking about that 2%, by the way, because they do remember that discussion in our last.
Well, and I will say it's gonna be about the 24 because it's based on the 5%, the new salary.
Mhm.
Rather than the old salary that you based it on prior to July 1.
Mhm.
So it's probably gonna be
2%
about.
plus,
What's the-
2% of the new salary? or-
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Right.
Action desired by the authority on that, or is that just a discussion topic?
I mean, is your locality looking at it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The board was very, affirmative.
Yeah, I was curious as to what other. groups were doing.
I try to align with what our county's doing, and they haven't agreed yet, but I'm proposing it at our work session next week.
Our budget was built to 7 because the state came through, so we're solid and Campbell to do the 7.
What would you want to do?
I would certainly support, the 2% increase. Like I said, my employees actually have just recently been asking, what's going on with that? Because they remember that discussion from our, budget meetings, earlier in the year.
We've got the money. I mean, if you can find it in the proposed budget, I would be in agreement.
As of
I'll
which
support
day? Just as of December 1?
I would. December 1.
Yeah. So,
Put forth the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Understand the motion to be to authorize an additional 2% compensation adjustment for all service authority staff effective December 1 to be taken out of vacancy savings recognized in the current fiscal year. Is that correct? Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. No opposed. All right.
I'll thank you on behalf of all my employees. They'll really appreciate that.
Okay, anything else on the financial report? All right, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
All right, Clerk Director's report, please.
Okay, we passed out couple versions of the pro forma. We've been working with Burns and McDonald, our consultant, that we had the same folks involved since its very beginning of the authority formation, and we've used this pro forma as a pretty accurate guide to help us along with our budget planning, long range. So each year we'll typically reconcile the pro forma with our actuals. We recently completed that, and also took a hard look at the closure reserve contributions moving forward. And as you can see, that's probably one of the things that jumps out at you when you first look at that is roughly almost a $10 tipping fee increase next year. That we're really need to look at. And as you remember, last budget year we had proposed an increase which didn't get approved, and we haven't increased the tipping fee only one time in the last 10 years, and that was only 75 cents back in FY15. And so that's the last time we actually increased tipping fees, FY15. So it's kind of catching up with us. And I'm gonna turn it over to folks at Burns and McDonald to review this pro forma and answer any questions you might have. Scott?
Yes, sir. Hey, thank you, Clark, and good afternoon. I'm Scott Pasternak with Burns and Mac, and as Clark had mentioned, have been working with the authority and its predecessor all the way back to the initial study that we completed, I think, back in 2005 or 2006. And I'm joined by Eric Weiss and Philip Kramer, and Eric is going to walk us through the pro forma analysis in just a moment. But I do want to just echo what Clark just mentioned as far as the importance of considering potential increases. We do a significant amount of financial analysis of this type for other solid waste utilities in cities all across the country, and there's a strong trend toward that need to look at rate increases. I know it's not a very fun or popular topic, but it is definitely really important, and especially for you all to consider those costs of closure, post-closure, because your best way to provide that funding is going to be from the users of your landfill. And so to be able to include those costs as a part of your rate is something that we would encourage you all to consider. So with that, Eric, would it make sense to share your screen and then we can walk through the analysis?
Sure, yeah. Would it be possible to enable the screen share? Or I think I saw Alec handing this out, so just want to make sure that what I'm looking at is what you all have in front of you.
Yeah, as long as it's the pro forma dated 10/25/2023, got an 8/27 print time on it, I think we're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, so looking at just walking through the top here, and I'm looking at the starting in the actuals from fiscal year 23 and then the projected through fiscal year 29. That's intended to line up with when the landfill would reach capacity. And to the question earlier about looking at those calculations, we've used what TRC had provided in their projections, and we just kind of independently verified that. So if you have any kind of further questions about when the landfill will reach the useful life and how that was calculated, feel free to ask those. But this pro forma assumes it will be in fiscal year 29. And what we're seeing at the top here related to the disposal rates is in 2022 is about 27.87 for the cost of service, and the member rate being 30.23. And this pro forma is a tool intended to ultimately calculate what that cost of service is and what the member rate would need to be in order to recover all those costs. So starting in the projected fiscal year 24, it's still 30.25 for the member rate, but then going into fiscal year 25, we see that jump that Clark had referred to, up to 3864, and then further up to 4121, and then decreasing slightly throughout the rest of the projection, but ultimately indicating there is a need for about a $10 per ton increase in order to meet what is mostly driven by the closure and post-closure contributions, which begin in fiscal year 25 in this look at the pro forma. So I just want to stop at this point and ask if there's any questions. If not, I'd just like to jump down right to that line number 19 and just talk through that in combination with what Sandy was describing on the financials.
Any questions yet? I think we're ready to hop to line 19, please.
Okay. So starting in fiscal year 24, it shows negative 266,854. And that's reflecting a borrowing against the closure and post-closure fund in that first year. And that's based on the information provided by the authority about how the purchase of land is being funded. But then going forward in fiscal years 25 to 29, we have what is an even 2 million in fiscal year 25, and then 3 million up until fiscal year 28. Then in the final year, we're calculating there what the remaining dollars would need to be in order to reach what is 19.2 million in total liability coverage for the closure and post-closure of the landfill. And so I just wanted to kind of explain there. We've made some assumptions and just kind of spread those costs out evenly. It doesn't indicate, or it's not meant to indicate that there needs to be 2 million in fiscal year 25 and 3 million in 26. Those costs could be spread out or proportioned differently based on the needs of the authority. But as part of this planning exercise, we spread those costs out so it's fairly equal for the projection from 25 to 29, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so in talking with the staff, I just want to draw everyone's attention down to line 49, which is the Services Authority's revenue as it relates to the distribution of airspace reserve. And so even once that is released, there will be a slight impact where it's showing now there needs to be about a $10 per ton increase. If you were to apply that, for example, to the closure and post-closure fund allocation, reducing those $2 million and $3 million fund transfers by $311,000 per year, it would lower the cost of service rate requirement and therefore the member rate, but it's still in that $8 to $10 increase range.
So it's
So
safe,
since we've, oh,
sorry.
please go ahead.
I ask a question. So it's safe to say that any contributions to closure, post-closure could reduce the future tipping fees needed to cover that cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for example, in line 19, if those $2 million and $3 million transfers are, if the need for, or if funding is able to be applied to that from elsewhere within the budget, it would result in the dollar values being less than $2 and $3 million. That would have an impact kind of at the top line there, where we're seeing in 2025 the need for $38.64. That could be reduced somewhere between $1 and $2, depending on how much line 19 is reduced by, and that's just based on discussions we had with authority staff on potentially where or exactly how to fund the closure and post-closure contributions.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Okay, what else?
Did,
I think,
you
sorry, was
mentioned,
that directed at me or?
you mentioned talking to authority staff. Who assisted you with this?
That was Clark and Alec and their team. Primarily, Clark and Alec and Sandy, just, in the process of updating this pro forma.
One thing I would like to mention, I know that you're looking at FY 25 member rate, almost $40 a ton. Even at that, that's still less than many localities in Virginia are paying for solid waste disposal per ton.
I was gonna ask the same question about the market rate. How do the market rates compare?
The market rate for public authorities are again comparable to what other authorities, public authorities are charging. The private landfills, I don't really have really good solid data on the mega landfills and what they're charging commercial customers. They have different price structures for different customers at different levels of tonnages. It's sometimes it can be difficult getting.
Does this cause you any concern in terms of going forward as to what what our market rates are shown here as? In terms of what we lose any market customers based on these rates? Do you think?
That's always a concern, when you're increasing your cost, for our private and I'll show you in a little bit, the question was asked last time, what is our percentage of market rate tonnages? And I'll address that, next, but, there could be some leaking of tonnages to other localities, but I know the closest localities are still charging more than that. Matter of fact, at our next board meeting, I could put together some real data on what our neighboring authorities and public landfills are charging, but
Could I request that, can I just ask you to compile that and send it to us? I mean, I don't know that we need to. wait
Yeah,
till the next
absolutely.
Authority meeting,
That'd be
right?
great,
I mean,
yeah.
if you can
Yeah,
Then do some polling and get that out to us. I think we'd all be interested in that.
yeah, definitely.
The reality is though, the longer we wait to increase tipping fees, the larger on the back end, those tipping fees will need to be, and the higher we will drive the market rate.
Yeah, and that also kind of ties into our financial assurance discussion earlier. It FY 29, if we don't have the money to close, then the members will have to financially assure that we have enough money to close.
And right now, the post-closure is essentially being funded 65% by market rate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, so if it's not funded at 65% that we're not paying for, we're gonna end up having to pay. Right? So sooner the better.
Yep.
I think we need to see where we are compared to the other areas, because we could lose some of that commercial tonnage, so we have to be cautious.
Yeah, I'll get that out
How
next week.
competitive we are.
And we also have the option of we've got the $10 differential. We also have the option of looking at that too.
We could do away with it, then we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore.
Well, that's a discussion above my pay grade.
And certainly cut off the funding.
Yeah.
The other strategy would be to increase it.
Yeah,
But that's largely Lynchburg's business community, to some degree Campbell's business.
Right.
community. No effect in Nelson, minimal effect out in Maddox, so how does that play out for everybody? But yeah, I think it starts with just a snapshot of where we are compared to, and I don't need to know somebody that's not a realistic option. I kind of want to know who these folks might actually drive trash to, right?
Right.
yeah. I think right now we're.
You say it wouldn't affect Appomattox,
I said it less so, I don't remember the.
Oh,
exact-
okay.
It wouldn't affect Nelson. 'cause they
Right.
don't pay the commercial rate,
but Ayers.
To
we
some
said-
degree, you.
Yeah. I know right now, we're getting calls from large commercial haulers that are disposing their waste at other neighboring authority landfills that are charging a lot more than we are, and they're calling us and asking if we'd be willing to accept their transfer station waste. And at this point, we can't because of our capacity issues. We also have a philosophy that we don't take out a region waste unless the board approves it, but even some probably leaks in from our borders, the issue with hauling is not only the gauge tipping fee, but also the cost of hauling and operating a transfer station, plus hauling it 100, 200 miles to another landfill, that adds up too. So even at $50 a ton, we're still in, I think in probably a pretty good spot. Especially with fuel costs and hauling costs have gone way up.
Like, the Roanoke Valley Resource Authority has its rates posted online. On the web. Their member rate is $55 a ton, and their commercial rate is $65.75.
What is the one down with Mecklenburg and Charlotte County, Halifax?
I can't Google it. Notwithstanding that, we'll get it to you.
Well,
Seems like the last time we looked at it, the one was closer to $60.
yeah, for the public authorities.
Yeah.
Now I as far as like the waste management facility in Amelia, the private landfill, we can probably guesstimate that they're charging somewhere between $20 and $25 a ton for disposal. But to haul it from here or this region to Amelia, that's going to tack on another $20 a ton. So, you're still looking at $45, $50 a ton.
I have the one you just asked about, it's $59 a ton. I mean, this was all those.
I think that illuminates the great value we're getting locally. But rather than sit and Google all the neighboring, maybe we just ask staff to put that together for
Yeah,
us. I appreciate that, but
Yeah, we'll try to get that out probably next week.
okay.
Thank
Okay, anything else? We have our guest with us who put the pro forma together. That's not always the case. Any other questions on the pro forma? All right, I don't hear any, so thank you all very much. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for having us.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
That we had not increased tipping fees in 10 years? Is that what somebody just said?
We did 75 cents. We hadn't done it in a long time, but we did
Okay.
75 cents.
Because I was looking back in-
FY17, we did 75. Actually FY15, we went from 28 to 28.75 in FY15. And that's the last time we've increased tipping fees.
well,
Other than, I'm sorry.
this
we
pro
went-
forma's wrong then.
We went in FY17, we went from 28.75 to 30.25, and we've maintained 30.25 since FY18.
Okay, anything else on that, Susan?
No, I just was looking at the pro forma. And,
Make sure the numbers line up.
yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to, where are we? Future planning report?
Yeah, at a previous board meeting, we discussed the project schedule for for a possible regional transfer station and a possible landfill expansion. Those options at this point don't seem to be very likely. However, I did want to just keep continuing to include these reports. And I have another report to add to that I'm going to pass out. This is a project schedule for actually the final closure cap on our last permitted cell, which is where we're operating in now. And this is just telling us that sometime in FY 29, probably early FY 29, which would be summer of 28, we're going to need to start planning for the final closure cap. And then begin construction of that within a year of actually closing the gates. Is what the DEQ typically requires. So this is just for your information to kind of keep this on the, keep this on the radar screen. And that's about when we'll start withdrawing funds out of the post-closure funds. It's somewhere
Summer of 28.
So, yeah, sometime in FY 29, we'll start drawing down the post-closure funds to start paying for the engineering and the plan prep and the construction of the final closure cap.
Okay, very good. Guys are very helpful. Any questions on any of that, anybody?
Did we have to pay for this report?
It's just a minimal amount. I asked TRC to put together those project schedules for me because they'll likely be the ones doing the engineering work.
I would suggest that we not pay for any more reports until that property is zoned where it will accept a transfer station or expansion.
Yeah, other than
I mean, we're throwing bad money after bad money. If we know what the report, and we're still not gonna be able to make any progress with getting it zoned.
Yeah, at this point, other than just putting together these little project schedules, we haven't spent any money planning or in any plans for those projects.
Yeah, I think that's prudent. I think both, it's helpful to see on the tables.
Right.
Any option requires a land use decision from Campbell.
That's right.
And two previous boards have denied it. So how do we? What's the magic wand that's gonna change that decision?
I think today's schedule is very helpful.
Yeah, well, that's why I included that final closure schedule. So we can kind of get that on our radar screen too.
All right, tonnage.
You have the typical tonnage report I prepared in board meeting in your packet. Basically, what that's telling us is that we had a bump in August, as you can see, and then it dropped back down in September. But our year-to-date numbers are pretty close, a little bit higher than our previous years, which is not a bad thing. So we're on track with our tonnage projections, maybe a little bit ahead.
Okay.
At the last board meeting, I was asked to take a look at the split between market rate and member rates. So rather than trying to squeeze all this information on this chart, I just made up another chart based on our FY 23 numbers. And I also broke it down per locality, so you can kind of get an idea of where the commercial market rate tonnage is coming from. And the first bar chart is shows each community's total member rate tonnage and total market rate tonnage for FY 23. So, and then I went ahead and included a pie chart below to show you the overall percentages or the overall tonnage numbers from each member. And that number includes the municipal member rate waste plus the commercial market rate waste that comes from each locality. This is just for your information that you asked for at the last meeting.
I've seen the 26 at the top of the Nelson column. It's just
Tons.
Ken, do you mind me asking, what's your rate at the transfer station? Is it still $55?
Yes.
It's changed. I was thinking for a while.
Yeah. Quite a while.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the tonnage information.
Yes, thank you very much for this.
Well, that takes us to the odor report. Please.
Since our last June 28th, 23 board meeting, we have had 3 odor complaints from one address. So,
Again, I appreciate everybody's efforts. I know I say it often, but this was quite an ordeal for our community a while ago. And I appreciate all the steps people have taken to get that to the degree it has.
yeah, it's been a real success story, I think.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Going back to the member tonnage sheet. So if at the end of 29, say there's not enough money in the post-closure fund, these localities would be obligated based on these percentages to pay for
Yes.
closure, post-closure?
That's what the financial assurance document basically says, is that if we don't have the money to fully fund closure or post-closure, that each locality will financially assure that the landfill will be properly closed and monitored and maintained for the post-closure period based on your percentage of the waste.
So the way I looked at that in the TRC report was that Campbell's total obligation based on percent was 5.7 million. And we're currently credited with about 1, I think, based on what's in there, if I've done that right. So it's in the TRC report, which will allow it.
Yeah, it's in the spreadsheets. It's broken down per locality.
Is that liability shown as if nothing is set aside, or if we're setting it aside? That's confusing to me. So our liability would be.
Yeah, at this point, it says nothing is set aside.
Just based on the total.
Yeah, because we're not required, the
Okay.
DEQ doesn't require us in our budget to put anything aside. They just require that, and we addressed that in our member use agreement at the beginning, is that, you know, each locality would financially assure the
Right.
closure, post-closure of the landfill. But the DEQ does require that document to be, and most of you, I'm sure all of you use what's called the local government test, which
Yes.
means you don't have to put any money away for it at this point, but if the time comes, you know, you've got the taxing authority to do that. You know, all that was addressed, you know, up front, and the DEQ does require that we do that every year because the costs change every year.
Right.
And, but and they don't require us to put money aside in a reserve account, which, you know, that's the preferable way to do it.
But since we are, the numbers that are shown in that report would be reduced.
Let's say we get to
For each
yeah, if
locality.
we get to 2029 and we're short $3 million, then that's the number.
Well, I think this is a good, I appreciate this because now it's eliminated a question and maybe a misunderstanding. There's a table in the financial assurance. It says tonnage and percentage estimates. And so it'll show in Campbell going back get up to the 1,035,000 total obligation based on the percentage 5.7, which gets us to the 16.2. And so you're saying none of the 3.3 that we have in the reserve is held against that in this analysis?
I do not believe it is.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
That would just be the percentage that whatever was left.
yeah, whatever we're short at the end of the day is you know, what each locality would have to.
Yeah, if we underfund closure, post-closure, we got to take our percentage share.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, clarify what the report didn't show.
That it didn't have that number big, and I
Yeah, and for-
appreciated that clarification.
And for Campbell Lynchburg, it also includes, the percentages also include pre-authority waste that was already in the landfill before we took over.
Okay. Good. That's everything on the agenda. Anything else from authority members?
No, I just really want to thank staff for providing the information requested and going through it with us, and it helps a lot.
Yeah, I'll
So
echo
thank you
that.
very much.
But I'll be a bit of a nitpick, right? It's a little difficult, 5:30 the night before, hand out that the meeting. So just, I appreciated all the data and the information certainly, but every effort made to get it out just a little more lead time is always appreciated. So I don't want to raid on the gratitude, but there's a lot to wrap my mind around with some other things going on. So
Okay.
thank you for the excellent. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Off the move. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds like everybody.